I'm David Bonacera, and I'm the owner of Steve's Polishing Pro Systems. Today, I'd like to talk to you about quartz countertops, or what people call also engineered stone. We're going to give you the pros and the cons about it, and especially you homeowners, we really want to talk to you and educate you and questions you do want to ask your contractor. And don't rely that your contractor knows everything about quartz, because it's more complex than stone. Today my guest is Adam Tomkins. Adam is with Diamond Vantage and General Tool. Adam's been working with natural stone and quartz countertops and other tooling since the 80s. So I would definitely consider him a very knowledgeable source. Adam, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much.
When I came up to San Jose from LA in the late 90s, there was only 3 companies who really had quartz countertops. They were really heavily textured. Nobody ever had any problems with them. And now there's like well over 40 companies or more that are making quartz countertops. So if they're not the same, and we know that they're changing the formulas but not letting us know, what are your thoughts on this? Because quartz is very complicated.
Well, it is complicated. I can remember back when I first got into the stone and the countertops, there was an understanding that this is a natural product that has fissures and pits and flaws and inclusions, and you accepted that. And then this engineered stone thing came along, and because it's a man-made manufactured product, it's perfect. It's uniform, it's consistent from slab to slab to slab, and according to the MSDS sheet, it was 93% quartz, 7% resin. But after that, the formulation is proprietary, and so we don't really know exactly what it's consistent of. And it has evolved. Originally, it was a very large grain, kind of simple, and it did have a texture, like you say. And then later it evolved into a finer grain that allowed them to do veining to make it look very, very much like marble and natural stone. And I believe it's still evolving.
The thing when you talk about the texture, though, when I came up here in '97, the thing that's really interesting is because the quartz crystals were bigger, and the polymer just sits underneath it. So you have bigger particulates of the quartz countertop, and that's what gives it its textures. Because the polymer is lower, you're not really dealing with the polymer, you're dealing with the quartz. That's why you don't have the problems, and it's more durable. Now everybody wants that veining, but they're getting fine grain, and now they're dealing more with the polymer and the nano coatings that are on there, and they're more susceptible to problems than, let's say, the bigger particulates.
Well, so let's talk about how that's created. So the process of creating engineered stone is very similar, at least in the polishing part, to doing natural stone, where it goes through a series of grits, and at the end it's fully polished, very glossy. And the difference is that because you have a difference in hardness from the quartz to the resin, as it's going through the machinery and it's getting hit with diamonds and a lot of water and pressure, it knocks that resin down just slightly, gives it a texture. Well, when you have the large particulate, you have a bigger gap in between the particulates, and so you have a deeper dip.
But in the texture, the quartz crystals are larger, substantially. It seems to me that they would be, because you don't have that problem with the heavy texture, but everybody wants the fine grain, and everybody's having hissy fits right now with some manufacturers. Some manufacturers, a few, are actually doing very, very well and make good quality countertops. But out of 40, they're not all great countertops.
Well, sure. I mean, it's like any product. You're going to have very high-end manufacturing and the big names, and then you're going to have low-end. So like anything, you get what you pay for. And it's not that they're after a particular texture. The texture is a byproduct of the manufacturing. So if you have the large particulate, you have a more aggressive texture, like an alligator skin or a snake skin. And with the fine particulate that has the higher resin content to create that veining, you have a much finer, kind of like an orange peel texture. But all engineered stones have a texture of some sort that's a byproduct from the manufacturing process.
I find myself as a restoration person that the finer grain people are having more problems with it. I don't like the textured stuff because I never get to fix it.
Well, I mean, that's why we're here. I really like your restoration system because it has so many variables that it covers the whole bandwidth of heavy grain, deep dipping to the really fine grain. And using your system, I've been able to replicate almost every single one.
The nice thing about the system is it actually works on stuff that they call quartz that is really not quartz at all. Some would call it behind closed doors garbage, but it also works on that too. They call it quartz, but it's not really quartz. It's almost like a buzzword, but they get away with it. They sell it. It's price point sensitive as far as, you know, being able to afford it and go, yes, I have quartz. And then they have problems with it and stuff. The durability, the larger textured, heavy grain snakeskin, alligator skin stuff is more durable as far as a countertop itself against scratching, stuff like that.
Well, it was a different process. To make the large particulate, it was a completely different process than making the engineered stone that has all the veining throughout it. And the difference is the ratio of quartz to resin. In order to create that veining, it requires more glue, more resin. And that's where the difficulties come in. The early stuff, I mean, I have it in my own house. I'm not in any way against engineered stone. And my kitchen is now close to 20 years old. And it's the original engineered stone. And it's held up really, really well.
Okay, so Adam, we want to know this. Do you have fine grain or do you have textured?
Well, back then the fine grain didn't even exist yet. So it's all the large particulate.
So that's why it lasts 20 years and he doesn't have any problem with it. Okay, good to know. 20 years. I have people having hissy fits in 6 months. Most of the countertops and other people teach about polyesters, but resins can really be a headache. I mean, not resins, but polyester resin, pretty much people will get it down. It's the acrylic and the acrylic materials that are in there that can cause hissy fits for trying to fix the countertops, the quartz, engineered, whatever you want to call it.
Well, so let's start with, let's specify that. Quartz and quartzite, people get confused about. Quartzite is a natural stone. Quartz is the man-made. It's an engineered stone. So I like the term engineered stone because it's very, very clear. It says that it's man-made.
Okay, because people do, I always have to clarify, is it quartz or is it quartzite? Well, what's the difference? And then you have to explain.
The difference is quite big. And then to talk about the resins now, you know, my company is a diamond tool manufacturer and we make polishing pads, and a lot of the polishing pads are resin infused with diamond. And there's a huge range from soft resins like our melamine pads to hard resins, which are more of an epoxy. So the same thing with engineered stone. Again, that's all proprietary. We don't really get to know. We don't know. That's why if someone asks my opinion, I'm going to say, well, go with a brand, a known brand. Don't go with a non-brand, because you're more than likely to get a better product, a more durable product.
I've walked into homes and I've looked at it. I asked them where it came from, and I looked at the client and I said, it's going to cost you less to replace it than it is to fix it.
And that happens also with natural stone too. To your point though, the older large particulate stone is a lot easier to repair. I did a video on that, what was that, 10, 12 years ago?
Yeah.
And the new stuff is a lot more complicated. And because in order to do the repair, I have to repair whatever the product is, take out a blemish, a scratch, or whatever. Then I have to texture it to match the whole rest of the surface. Otherwise, in good light, you can see the inconsistency. So it's really a challenge.
Yeah, it is a lot more a challenge than stone, tenfold. And right now, there's products out there that will get you shine really, really fast, but it won't get you textured. And most people, it would drive them crazy because they walk by every morning, every afternoon, or every evening, and they see that little spot that they couldn't quite get.
Sure.
And that's what's important. So as far as the difference between natural stone and engineered stone, most people are going to it because A, they don't have to seal it. It doesn't really stain, but you have to be careful with it.
Again, that varies on the quality level. I have been told on some stones you can't use acetone or you can't use aggressive cleaners because you can take the sealer off of it. Again, that's on the lower end. And what happens if it's a lower end that uses fillers like calcium carbonate and it doesn't have that sealer on it, they are going to stain.
Now, sealer, you're talking about what they would call nano coating?
Again, proprietary. I don't know. I just know that there's many brands that say specifically, do not use acetone. And they don't.
I find Quartz you can't use acetone at all. I know I've been on many cases where the contractor had to replace the kitchen because they cleaned with acetone. Well, yeah, we're professional. We've been doing this a long time. And they ruin the countertop, and then you have to refinish it. Well, it then becomes, how much does it cost to refinish versus, you know what, the contractor made a mistake. He owes you a new kitchen.
Again, varying qualities, every brand is different, so we have to talk in generalities. I know that there are brands that say you may not use acetone. I can't speak for all of them. That's not my expertise.
I will.
Okay.
And I will say, no, you cannot use acetone on quartz countertops. End of story. Thank you very much. I help the next person in line. It just, forget it. You can't. You can't. What about, now natural stone can absorb heat. What about quartz? Can it absorb heat like appliances, toaster ovens, crock pots? I've seen where crock pots actually cracked the countertops.
Yeah, and again, varying qualities, with the brands, but I've seen that too. I live in Arizona, and you can't store slabs outdoors. They'll warp. The heat will bend them. And then you have to figure out a way to straighten them back out, which a lot of times is just simply flipping it back over. And so they are sensitive, and that varies with the content of resin. The more resin that's in it, the more susceptible they are to heat. I did go on a job as a consultant where there was a crack right in the middle of the countertop, not even at the seam, but right in the middle of the countertop. And my first question was, did somebody stand on this? Was there something abnormal? And we went through all the questions, and at the very end, we found out there was a crock pot sitting right above that spot.
Yeah, I've seen that too. And actually, I thought at the beginning that it was the inside edge not being the correct radius, which happens in natural stone. If you do a real sharp 90, you really, a lot of times when fabricating, need to make a radius to take that tension off in fabrication. Sure. And a lot of times at first I thought it was a 90. So if anybody, you get a fabrication and they give you a 90 and you get a crack, there's a good chance that because they didn't have that proper radius on the inside or outside of that material, that it can stress and crack. But in this case, it was the crock pot.
Well, your point is very valid, but in this situation, it was the back of the countertop. In the middle of the countertop, it was straight. There was no radius. It was
right. It wasn't like a stone where it's under a dishwasher and the steam comes up, it gets the wood wet. and then it eventually bows and cracks the countertop. This is entirely different.
Yeah, no, that wasn't this case. But, engineered stone is very popular, especially the veined, and it has its place. It's a good material. It's for sure a step up from, the old Formica days. So it has its place, but just like with natural stone, you need to know the pros and cons. I mean, I wouldn't put natural marble in my kitchen. It can etch, it can stain, it's porous. I mean, but it's beautiful. So if you want that marble look, engineered stone is a great option. You just have to understand maintenance and care, no different than natural stone.
Okay, what about quartz outside? You talked about being in Arizona, being really hot, having it warp. I have seen quartz countertops outside completely lose their color.
And I have too. So
and let's stop before you answer that. Most, if not all, let's say most of the enhancers out in the industry today are not truly UV stable. So you can do it, but you're going to be redoing it every year. But what I have found is that I'd say most, if not all, of the countertops that were outside that were heavy colored lost their color.
Yeah, I did a favor for a friend. He had a bench that he brought over from the Philippines. It was a mosaic, and it had just come apart. And so I redid it with a piece of blue engineered stone, beautiful dark blue with the metallic flecks. And within a year, it had completely lost all of its color. I find it interesting that I was at the Breton factory in Italy some years ago, and they were showing us a totally UV stable engineered stone that would have been fine for outdoors. But I haven't seen it here in the US yet. So I think it's something that is coming. It's evolving. Porcelain is evolving and engineered stone is evolving.
Everything evolves real fast. Like Steve's Polishing Pro system, it was one of the first systems for quartz. And it's still prevalent today. It's just a good standard in the industry. Okay. What about the hazards of fabricating? Okay. Back in the day, in the first .com boom, when everybody bought granite countertops, a lot of men and women got sick because of the silica. It got in their lungs. They didn't have proper respirators. And your membranes, by the way, folks, is your eyes, your ears, your nose, and your mouth. Those are all membranes, okay? Though inhalation of silica is very, very bad because it's almost like wet sand in your lungs. And I've actually had to quantify with some doctors who didn't know about silicosis, and to this day, I've even brought up to some of the clean air people, and they said, well, we're not going to bring it up unless it's a pandemic, which is a crock. But that's the politics. But the question is, doing engineered stone, what is the hazards of that, of the people manufacturing it? Because we're not talking stone and silica, but we're really talking resins now. And maybe it's like when you sand the floor and you get to the 200 grit, it becomes real fine particulates.
Yeah. Well, it's no different than fabricating natural stone. You don't want to breathe stone dust because that dust is, microscopic little rocks, but still rocks. But then it's compounded with the resins. You don't want to be breathing these fine particulates of resin either. So the safety precautions, they're identical. You should be doing it wet, or you should be wearing proper masks and respirators.
Now, stone doesn't generally catch on fire. What about the quartz and the resins? I have played with some, and I have found that some of it extinguish themselves. But then again, I've seen agglomerates in large projects where I did some testing as an expert, and I found that the material actually caught on fire and stayed on fire because of the resins.
I've never seen that, so I can't speak on that. I can say that I've seen it burn. I've seen burn marks. If you leave a cigarette on the engineered stone, you're going to get a
Absolutely.
burn. I've never seen it catch on fire. I really can't comment on that.
Okay. Yeah, because again, there's a lot of different manufacturers, and we don't know when they change, and yet the stuff is right next to a stove.
Sure.
So you would think that they would have our best interests at heart. You would think. What about wet areas with engineered stone? Because designers are coming up with all kinds of stuff. They listen to the manufacturers. The manufacturers will tell them one thing, and the facts really are another. We've seen that through the decades.
Yeah.
What about wet areas and showers with quartz?
Because it's non-porous, I like it in showers. At my house, in my bathroom, I have a man-made shower, and it just happens to be almost identical to the natural stone that it's next to, because it's a better surface than the natural stone.
Okay, so walls. What about floors?
See, because it's softer than your granites, I wouldn't be a fan of that. I would think that your shoes can pick up rocks that would scratch. I just don't think it would hold up as well as porcelain or
And then we
granite.
have the problem of the people who come in and clean the shower, and you have hard water deposits. How are you supposed to get those off?
Again, you need to understand the material and use appropriate maintenance products.
Yeah, a lot of times, a lot of my clients will squeegee, and when they squeegee, and they leave the door open after they're done to let it air out, and they keep their soap down to glycerin soap instead of regular bar soap, which is a food source for mold. I find, especially with squeegeeing, they really extend the life of their material.
Yeah, regardless of what you're going to put in, natural stone or porcelain or engineered stone, understand the maintenance. Understand what works well and what doesn't.
Yeah, but you want to find out before somebody wrecks it and it costs you a bunch of money.
Oh, heck yeah.
Okay, let's get into refinishing and talking about how to fix this material. Because a lot of guys who do natural stone think the quartz is the same. And then sometimes they end up just having a bad day or a bad week because it's a different material, it's a different animal than what natural stone is.
Yeah, anybody that can surface polish and repair natural stone is an artist. That's hard. I would say maybe 5% of the fabricators out there can do good surface polishing. And that's on natural stone. Then when you do engineered stone, it's that entire process and that entire skill set. And then a second skill set is necessary to put the texture back on so that in proper lighting, you can't see it. And it's tough. It requires a lot of practice.
You have to get the shine and you have to get that texture.
Correct.
And that's what's real important. The other factor that's real important is you have to keep that material cool because you can burn the polymers.
Yeah, it's true. So it's a skill set. It's I like this system a lot, but I would consider this for professionals.
Right.
You can get close with a lot of other products, but to really match a factory finish, you need a lot of these variables that you have here, and you need to be very open-minded because every single one of these brands is going to be different because of their makeup, and so they're
going to change them throughout the years, being price conscious because of other countries lowering their prices, or lowering the materials, lowering cost. They won't tell you. So what material you may have 1 year, 2 years later may not be the same.
Yeah,
same
it's
thing.
true. So you need to go in there with an open mind. You need to assess what the problem is, and then you use your best judgment to figure out where your starting point is, You know, remove whatever the problem is, match the color, match the shine. That's where, you know, the diamond tools that we make come in. And then from there, once you've got the color and the shine, now you've got to do the texture. And so it's compounded.
Yeah, one of the things about the Steve's Polishing Pro Systems is the pad itself. This is a 6-inch pad. These are the 4-inch pads, but I'll show you at home so you have a better idea of this. And that is what keeps it cool is the type of leather that it is. And the other thing is most times when people are refinishing, the water spits out. So this is designed and made and channeled so that the water comes back to the center, keeping the material much cooler. And that's what I found really a huge thing is those two things, the material plus nobody has anything that channels inside to keep the material cool. And then we talk about the texture, and the texture is very, very important because a lot of people right now have systems where they are getting the right shine very quickly, but they say, well, this is the best I can do, ma'am, and you know, that's all I can do. This is what the industry has. They're lying through their teeth. They just want to get your money and take off. But the truth is, they can get the texture.
Yeah, you have to have high standards, you know, and it's like when I was raising my kids. In the beginning, I said, you know, clean your room, and they'd kind of clean it, and they'd go, I'm done. And eventually, I got to where I said, no, make it look like new. And then there was no gray area. And that's what you're trying to achieve with your refinishing system is make it look like new. You know, not good enough,
well, because
but perfect.
As the customer, they expect a professional to walk into their house and give them professional results. And sometimes we're saying they just don't make it like they used to, or contractors aren't what they used to. The homeowner you are paying for, the customer, is paying for it to be done correctly. Don't take any garbage, the nicest word I could use, as far as, well, this is as best I can get. Well, you may have the wrong person because you're right. What they're paying for is a quality repair. Unless they really don't care and it's on a budget and say, well, just fix it. My wife's on my case about this.
Standards.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, standards and expectations. And all anger comes from unfulfilled expectations.
Well, interesting. Do you have anything else on quartz countertops that the people should know?
No. You know, everybody should do their research. And they should understand what it is that they're getting, and proper maintenance is really important. But you know what I'd really like to do is I'd like to get some stone and do a little damage on it, some of the engineered stone, and let's do a repair, and let's show the professionals the method of how to get from, you know, a problem to a solution.
All right, we'll do that on the next video. Adam, thank you for being here so much. And I know the folks at home really appreciate all the education that you've given them, which they're never going to get from their contractors.
So the information's out there. You just got to do your research, and I'm always glad to help educate the people that want to learn. I'm still learning, so after 35 years, if I don't know it all, we can all learn.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Folks, you just got a heck of an education on engineered stone, which they call quartz countertops. Ask the questions, do the research. Thanks for being here. Good night.